How we view events of the past change with time and perspective. Historians are now taking a closer look at one of the state's most tragic events. It is a chapter of history that few people know about or even understand. In tonight's All About Arkansas, Steve Powell recounts the frightening last days of September 1919 in the small Delta town of Elaine, Arkansas.
In this part of Phillips County, the crops stretch beyond the horizon. Field upon field bake in the steamy Delta heat. A small community does stand in the midst of all this farmland, but precious little is growing in town. They've closed the schools here. Elaine, Arkansas is fighting for its survival. It's hard to imagine tougher times, but here it's been worse, much worse.
Historically, this was just about the worst thing that could have happened in the United States.
Author Griff Stockley is one of the state's preeminent scholars on race relations. He believes what happened in Elaine some 87 years ago may be the bleakest moment in Arkansas's racial history. Locals say it happened here at what's now known as Morning Star Church. A group of mostly black sharecroppers held a union meeting. Many whites opposed the union and the emerging black empowerment movement. A few showed up outside the church.
We don't know whether they were just there to spy or to break up the meeting. But as it turned out, their shots rang out. We don't know who fired the first shot, but a white was killed.
What happened next was a firestorm. Blacks
outnumbered whites 9-1 in that part of the county. And whites began to panic, thinking that blacks were going to, quote, revolt.
The papers of the day fueled the panic. Angry whites descended on Elaine by the hundreds. The result, according to Stockley, was no riot. It was a massacre.
We basically had a 600 person to 1,000 person posse that came in and just literally began to shoot blacks.
500 troops from Camp Pike came to restore order. Governor Brough came on the same train. It was too late for many. Stockley says hundreds of African Americans had been killed.
If I'm right about the number of people killed, it represents the worst racial violence in the United States that's ever occurred.
5 whites died too. In the aftermath, blacks were arrested by the dozens. 12 were hastily sentenced to die in the electric chair.
We know that hundreds of African Americans were killed in Elaine, but in fact there was not a single white who was charged for the murder of any of them.
The 12 blacks sentenced to death were eventually released, thanks in part to the legal work of black Little Rock attorney Scipio Jones. The men had spent years in prison.
Whites certainly are in denial about what happened, but at the same time, blacks historically have not wanted to address these issues, and nothing could be more painful than to think about the fact that your relatives were massacred.
Historians like Stockley will continue to study what happened all those years ago. As for the folks in Elaine, they have little time to contemplate the past. They just want to secure their future. Steve Powell, All About Arkansas.
And the Elaine school closing came through consolidation. Many in the county hope that decision will be reversed. By the way, Stockley's book on Elaine is called Blood in Their Eyes, and it is available in bookstores.